All right, good morning. Good early morning for those of you on the West Coast, and good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast and everywhere in between. We're very honored for you all to join us today for a really special conversation with student loan borrowers that often feel they get ignored, parent borrowers, parent plus borrowers, borrowers that are parents themselves and student loan borrowers. And you'll hear in just a moment from our wonderful partner and Representative Congresswoman Pressley. But before that, we're just going to give it a couple seconds for folks to join. Just wonderful to see, hundreds of folks joining on Wednesday morning, and especially to our parents that are joining our roundtable today. We know that it takes a lot for you to take time off of work, time off of looking after your children, time off of being a student. So we really appreciate you joining our midday event. So, today we are going to talk about student loan debt and parent borrowers, but also we have a very exciting thing, which is that we're finally on the other side of this student debt cancellation debate, which, spoiler alert, they canceled student debt, and that's amazing. And they also canceled student debt for parents, which often parents, as I said before, feel very left out and feel like programs aren't generous enough for them. This is for you. So just to recap, the president about a little over a month ago said that he was going to cancel student debt for those who make under $125,000 a year or under $250,000 for families. 10,000 minimum, an additional 10 if you were a Pell Grant recipient, which means low income at time of borrowing. So that's up to $20,000. And that includes all direct loans, parent plus loans, that's the key one, and graduate student loans. So probably they say like 95% of borrowers can take advantage of this. So I'm sure you're one of them. We will have more cancellation workshops as we've been having after today, but today is really to focus on the amazing parents that have joined us today, and also the amazing Representative Pressley. So today it's an honor to introduce Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. She is an activist, she is a legislator, a survivor, and the first woman of color to be elected to Congress from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Throughout Congresswoman Pressley's career, she has fought to ensure that those closest to the pain are closest to the power. That's huge, right? That's what we do at Student Debt Crisis, elevating your voices to make sure that you're heard by people like the wonderful Congresswoman Pressley. She works driving, informing policy making. And as a Congresswoman for Massachusetts in the 7th Congressional District, she has been a champion for justice and healing, reproductive justice for immigrants, consumer justice, justice for seniors, for workers, for survivors of sexual violence, for formerly and incarcerated individuals, for student loan borrowers, for sure, and for folks who have experienced trauma. She has also turned her experience living with alopecia into action, becoming a leading voice fighting to raise awareness and support for the alopecia community across the nation. We have worked with Congresswoman Pressley for years, since she was one of the co-authors of the resolution to cancel student debt. And it is my distinct honor to introduce you today. Welcome, Congresswoman Pressley.
Thank you, Natalia. It is so good to sit at this virtual table with all of you. And I'm glad that you see me as not a special guest, but as a sibling, really, in the movement for justice in every iteration. And we are certainly one step closer because of the work of this coalition and the millions who shared their stories. So today is a good day. Although our work certainly isn't over, it is well underway. And I know that when this announcement was rolled out, that there were millions across our nation who slept a little bit better that night, knowing that President Biden was taking this action, and they woke up the next day a little bit more hopeful and optimistic about the future. And Natalia, you're right. We have been organizing together for years. And as my sibling in the movement, Latasha Brown reminds us so often, organized power is realized power. And because we continue to organize, to be in coalition, to be in movement, we now see a powerful and bold transformative step that has been taken. And that is that President Biden heeded our calls. And we know that this action is one that will quite literally change and save lives. So as we come together today, I thought that I would, with each roundtable or webinar or press conference, that I would become less emotional, but I find myself coming that much more emotional the more real this becomes. As I'm thinking about every person in the last 2+ years who has pulled me aside in community and who lowered their eyes, whose shoulders were rounded with shame, burdened by this debt and burdened by the shame of this debt that was quite literally choking at the promise of our families and our communities and crushing crushing people's dignity, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. And so the coalition that rallied around our calls to cancel student debt is as broad and diverse as those who are burdened by this debt. And we know that people from every walk of life, families of every model, are impacted by this economic justice, racial justice, and gender justice issue. And I'm just so grateful to each person who summoned the courage to share their stories. Although I look forward to a day where people don't have to relive their trauma in order to compel action from their government, I'm grateful for those who did share their stories. It made the difference in our efforts here. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that I don't believe this day would have happened were it not for the millions who shared their stories. And I'm very intentional in not referring to it as debt forgiveness, because borrowers don't need to be forgiven anything. They've done nothing wrong. But I thank those of you who shared your stories, who trusted us to amplify them and to bring them into every negotiation, to every roundtable, to every press conference. You shifted the frame here. You made plain just how burdensome this debt is and how unjust it is. And the possibility of a nation where families are no longer crushed by this debt for simply doing as they were told and pursuing an education. The fact that, that we are closer to that because of your willingness to share those stories is just awesome. And so I'm just, again, incredibly grateful. And again, just to our borrowers, you've only done what you were told to do. If we live in a meritocracy, if education is life's great equalizer, and it's only been farther and farther put out of reach for people with the cost of higher education having increased by 150%. There's no shame in your debt. The only shame is that it's taken us so long to unburden you from it. So today we're going to hear from two parent borrowers who I'm so appreciative again of their willingness to share their stories. And I have to say, over the course of the years, so many parents have shared their student debt stories with me. And each time it has been gutting. Not only parents who wish to retire but can't because of the Parent Plus loans that they took out so that their babies would be set on the best trajectory to make a contribution in community, in society. But also that it's an intergenerational crisis. Of course, there are parents who are paying on their babies' loans and also still paying on their own, when all anyone has wanted to do is just to better themselves, to further their education, to support their families. And, in co-signing those Parent Plus loans to open the doors for your children, oftentimes you have shut the doors for yourself in so many other ways. Because of how burdensome this debt is. So I thank our parent borrowers. Your stories matter deeply. Thank you for sharing your stories. Again, it is how we were ultimately able to get President Biden to take this transformative action I'm forever grateful to the advocates who are standing alongside us today and the many others across this nation who joined in this fight. And again, our work is not over. Across this nation, over 40 million people are eligible for this student debt cancellation. And so now in this moment, our shared work is to focus on implementation to ensure that all who are eligible are feeling the impact of this relief and cancellation. So we can't let up now. We have to remain in coalition, organizing and mobilizing to get the word out, to cut through any unintended red tape, to put loan servicers on notice that if you try to mislead a single borrower out of the relief that they deserve and that this coalition demanded, you will not get away with it. And that is a promise, because certainly in my capacity on the oversight committee, we're going to be paying very close attention to ensure that in the implementation, that it is equitable, that it is efficient, and that it is streamlined, and that if any bad actors show up, that they are held to account. Again, it's hard not to get emotional thinking about the impact of this and what it's going to mean for millions of families, especially families that have historically been denied the opportunity to own a home or to build generational wealth. This is the type of transformative policy that sends ripples forward for generations. Student debt cancellation will change and save lives. And so with that, I'll now turn it over to Joanna from Parents Together.
Thank you so much for introducing Representative Pressley, and thank you so much for those great remarks. A little bit about Parents Together. Parents Together, our mission is to provide the news families need, as well as exciting advocacy opportunities. So this is where we work with our parents, and members from Parents Together know firsthand how impactful the payment pause has been these past 2 years, from being able to build a savings account for the first time, to finally being able to purchase a home or starting a college fund for their own children. Lifting the weight off of student debt has helped so many families during these very difficult past few years. And so at Parents Together Action, we sent out a survey earlier this year and found that 50% of parents with student loan debt said that if the payment pause ended, they would be unable to meet their basic financial needs. And we heard many stories of parents who have tried to help their children get through college by taking out Parent Plus loans, but then get trapped into further debt. Too many parents then blame themselves for not being able to get their child out of debt and falling deeper into debt when trying to help. I relate to that as a first-generation college graduate. My parents, being immigrants, did not know how to get me through college in the US. They knew education was important, so they advised me to take out as many loans as I needed and that it would be an investment for my future. And of course, it didn't completely pan out that way. And my parents blamed themselves for not being able to pull me out of debt. But the reality is that it's not the fault of parents or students. This is a broken system that traps and pushes families into financial crises. That is why we came together and collected nearly 14,000 signatures calling on President Biden's administration to not only extend the pause, but also provide debt cancellation. And we won, but it doesn't end here. We must continue fighting to fix this broken system so that all families can actually benefit from a college education and not get trapped into a cycle of debt. And with that, I'll pass it on to Sabrina, Director of Outreach at Student Debt SDCC. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna, and thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Congresswoman Pressley. My name is Sabrina Calazans. I'm the Director of Outreach at Student Debt Crisis Center. It is an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you today. My job and the goal at Student Debt Crisis Center is to amplify borrower stories. And so I have the opportunity to speak with student loan borrowers, and I know for a fact that if it wasn't for student loan borrowers sharing their stories and telling us how they're being impacted, that student debt cancellation would not have been possible. And like many families across the country, my family is also impacted by student loan debt. Both my sister and I have student loans. My father has Parent Plus loans that he took out to help support my sister and I. And so I also carry, that guilt and shame, which I often hear from other borrowers, of having to have your parents take on the student loan debt, or the parents feeling the guilt of having their children take on the student loan debt. And so I know a little bit about what that feels like, but I know that my family and millions of other families will benefit from the President's Student Debt Cancellation Plan. As Congresswoman Pressley has said, this is a multi-generational issue. It burdens grandparents, parents, their children, and it's important to amplify these borrower voices. So I'm extremely excited to be joined today by two student loan borrowers who are parents and who will be sharing their stories. And so I'd like to introduce our borrowers for the day. So today we're joined by Angel and Khadijah. Angel is a single mother based in Oregon who took out Parent Plus loans to help with her son's college education. Her loans added up to about $31,000 with a 7% interest rate. Angel was targeted by a predatory loan consolidation company that claimed they would help her with her debt. And after a year's worth of payments, she discovered that through her bank statements, her payments were going to a completely different company that had nothing to do with paying off her loans. She is still paying off her Parent Plus loans, and together with her son's loans, she estimates to owe around $40,000 in student loans. And Khadijah Ture Sengova is an attorney at Best & Associates LLP, who resides in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. She's a single parent and has a 6-year-old daughter. Khadijah has borrowed over $100,000 in student loans. She initially was paying off her loans through a private loan servicer until she learned she could consolidate her loans through the Department of Education. Now that she has consolidated her loans, she has been able to benefit from the moratorium on student loan repayments. The pause on payments has allowed her to catch up on expenses and bills, invest in her daughter's education, and enroll her daughter in extracurricular activities that are enriching to her child's development. Again, thank you both for joining us. I have a few questions for you both today. I'm going to start off by asking Angel, and then Khadijah, I'll ask you the same question. So the first question that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, Angel, how has student debt impacted you as both a borrower and a parent? I know that in your story, you mentioned that you have Parent Plus loans. What has that been like for you and for your family?
Well, it's been very challenging because in the beginning, we did it with, hopes that my son would go to school, and in the end, he would take over the loans and we'd pay him back and things would be fine. But my son's schooling didn't go as planned, and he only went for a year and a term, and then school ended, and I didn't hear anything for a while. And then all of a sudden I just started getting bombarded with phone calls. So did my son. So there was always dread when the phone rang. They would call about 3 or 4 times during the day. So it led to a lot of anxiety in our family and pressure, which was already there. Unfortunately for my son, I didn't realize how much pressure I, as a mother, was putting on him to go to school and to do what I thought, I was raised to do. I went into trade, and I wanted something better for my son, so I kind of forced school for him. And to do that, we had to take out loans. And he wanted to go to a different school in a different state, so our loans were very expensive. So I'm talking like I have 30, it's closer to 32 for the year and a term. And that's just a year and a term. And I had him take out some as well because I had been led to believe that he would have a better opportunity. He was thinking of being a teacher. He'd have a better opportunity of actually writing off his loans, So I had him take out some as well. And it was very stressful. And I didn't really have a lot of things in writing, so I didn't quite understand the interest rate that I was racking up. So I guess pressure and anxiety is what it caused our family.
Yeah, I know that
a lot of stress.
One thing that I hear often from many borrowers is the impact on mental health. I know that student debt is a mental health issue. There's a lot of stress, depression, anxiety associated with all of that. And so I definitely hear you on that, especially the guilt and shame that accompanies many borrowers. I think many of us are told, go to college, it'll help, carve a better future for you. But the loans really hold a lot of people back, and it just is a really big burden for many families. So thank you for sharing all of that, Angel. And Khadijah, I want to ask you the same question. How has student debt impacted you as a borrower and as a parent of a younger child? What does that look like for you?
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you, Congresswoman Pressley, Parents Together, SDCC staff, and all those that took the time to join today and to allow us to share our stories. Student loan debt for me has been like carrying a weight for the past 17 years. And even prior to that, I had been able to pay off the one loan I took out for undergraduate studies after having earned a scholarship, and also 2 years of graduate studies of loans I had paid off. And I had to do it by working multiple jobs, full-time, part-time, just to make sure that the debts were paid. And so I felt successful after having paid off those loans. But then I decided to go to law school and just presume that I would eventually have a job that would help me to manage the payments. In my case, according to my path, I didn't go into the field of full-time practice in law for 13 years. And so that money that I would have expected to make and pay down this debt didn't come right away. And throughout that time, eventually I became a mom, and it's impacted me and my daughter such that we just have to be thrifty. The debt is a priority, or repayment of the debt. And so even with taking forbearance and deferment, I, for the greater part of the last 17 years, have made monthly payments. But I owe more now than I did when I started, and I've been paying monthly for the most part all these years. And so it's been to the point where I've had to decide to prioritize the debt, the payment of it. And that has meant sacrificing in things that are self-care oriented, or just doing things to make sure that my family, my daughter is well taken care of, that she's able to have the best life and developmental opportunities. And luckily with the debt pause, the payment pause, I was able to realize what it meant to have that extra money to do things for me and my daughter. And so it's been a tremendous impact on my life. And unfortunately, I'm back where I started. I'm happy to have more relief now, but it's still a weight, like I said, that you just carry around, and it's almost suffocating at times.
Definitely. And I think the same thing with Angel's story. It's that interest, it just feels like you can't get out from under it. And we hear people take out, let's say 20,000, and then because of the interest, it can balloon out of control to something that you never expected and you've been paying off for so many years. And instead of your debt balance going down, it's going up. And so it's just overwhelming for so many families. And I know at the start of the call, Natalia mentioned a little bit about President Biden's cancellation plan. Some borrowers will be eligible for 10,000, others will be eligible for 20,000 in cancellation. I know that both of you have more than that. So I know it won't completely clear your debt, but is this a sign of hope for you as student loan borrowers that the president has actually taken action? Will it impact you? Would you like to see further action? What are the emotions that you feel when it comes to the president's cancellation plan? And it's open to either one of you, whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, I'm excited. I hope that it'll lessen my debt. A couple of years ago, before the pandemic, my son went into collections because he just got so frustrated with the calls. And I worked really, really hard. I made him just sign over everything to me so they can no longer contact him. I handle all of his student loan debt. And I was actually able to get him out of collections. And like she was saying, it's like this weight over here. So like I defer it, but when I go to do things, like I recently had to get a car, it's always right. They're like, well, what about this student loan debt? It's right here. It's this little cloud. So it'll be nice not to have that cloud there. And yeah, it'll be nice. It'll be a little less stressful. I am still really nervous because I haven't looked into mine for a moment, and I'm a little nervous on where that interest is. I'm not gonna lie. What would be nice too is if there was a way to like lower some of that interest. That would be really, because I didn't realize in the beginning I was at, and it's like a 7.99, it's closer to 8%. I had no clue, and I had good credit when I got my, Parent Plus loan. So it's going to be a relief, but definitely, I don't know, a little more would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Khadijah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd say I am grateful, first of all, because I will be eligible for some type of cancellation. And I'm optimistic that more will come. 10,000 doesn't seem like much off of 100,000, but it at least is, a sign that steps are being taken in the right direction. I unfortunately didn't qualify as, for a cancellation based on work in the public sector. The job that I had prior to this, and for 20 years, we had a department that if I worked in that department, I would have qualified, but not my luck and fortune at this moment. I just think that, knowing that there's at least some type of reduction gives me sort of the confidence to know that, I can try to do little by little as I have been doing. And if I have 30 years ahead of me, I'm hoping that some type of, executive action or congressional action happens such that maybe there's more support or consideration for that period of time. Consider that you're working in the field that you took the loan in. Consider adding more forbearance options, especially if I have 30 years ahead of me. Give me more opportunities to take a deferment where it's not a catastrophe, where I just need a break. So again, grateful, but certainly optimistic towards what could possibly happen in the future that could relieve me and my daughter's burden.
Definitely. I know that at Student Debt Crisis Center, we really advocate not only for student debt cancellation, but for changes to the student loan system in general, interest and just reforming the system that has harmed so many borrowers. And I think, with the president's cancellation plan, I know that it will impact about 20 million people will have their debts completely canceled, but we know that there are more borrowers who will still have a balance. And so we're going to continue fighting for them. I know that in my personal story, my sister's debt will be completely canceled. I will have 20,000 of mine canceled. I'll still have a balance remaining, but 2/3 of my debt will be canceled, and almost all of my dad's Parent Plus loans will be canceled. So for my family and for so many, it seems like there's finally a light at the end of the tunnel. There's finally some hope. It feels like student loan borrowers are finally being acknowledged. And after so many years of people sharing their stories of feeling alone, there is action being taken to help us and support us. And I think student debt oftentimes feels a bit lonely, like it feels like it's just you and your situation. And there's a lot of shame and guilt when it comes to sharing and talking about debt. But I applaud the two of you and everyone who speaks up about their student debt situation, because there's power in vulnerability. There's power in us sharing our stories and coming together and in numbers. And so I think that is really impactful. And for the both of you, I think I would love to hear your thoughts on what do you wish people knew about student loan borrowers and parents of student loan borrowers? Because I think sometimes we hear people say like, oh, well, I paid off my debt. Why don't you pay off yours? But there's so many scenarios in life and situations that it's tough. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you wish people knew about student loan borrowers and your situation.
Okay, I'll go again. I just had high hopes, for my son. I just wanted the best for him. In actuality, I realized I wanted to go to school, not him. And I pressured him. And I really, we just want the best, for our kids. That's really all I wanted. And I really hope that my son once this all gets resolved, I hope he'll relook at education again and not see it as something that for him it was a real burden and stressful. And I think as a parent, I just wanted better for my son. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted better for him than myself.
Khadijah?
I would agree very much. I would just add that the issue and the debt crisis that we have right now is more about the systemic, impacts on the borrowers and not so much the decision that the borrowers took to take the loans. And so I wish that people would realize the bigger picture of why we are here right now. Obviously, yes, we took loans that we signed and said that we would repay. Just not knowing what factors would hinder that. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration. We're everyday people. It's not just folks that took one class and they owe a few $100s. You have people like me that have advanced degrees and have paid thousands of dollars towards my education, and that should be in consideration.
Well, I want to thank the both of you for that answer, because I think I'm so grateful to my parents, and I know that my parents, everything they do is for me and for my siblings, and I know that the both of you have made decisions that, was to benefit your family, and you shouldn't be penalized for that. You did what was right. You did what was going to impact your family for a better future. And so I think it's completely immoral that the weight falls on your shoulders, that your family has to bear a burden that shouldn't exist in the first place. And so I applaud the both of you for being great parents, for doing what you needed to do for your family. So I think that's all of the questions that I had, but I'd love to open it up to Congresswoman Pressley and Natalia and Joanna, if anyone would love to ask a question.
I don't have a question. I just have a request, and that is that Angel and Khadijah will continue to practice some grace towards themselves. As I said earlier, I do look forward to a day where people don't have to relive their trauma in order to compel action. But I'm so grateful for your willingness to share your story. It is influencing policy, and that is how we are supposed to legislate, in a way that is cooperative and that is from the ground up, because it's our job as lawmakers to be problem solvers and to advance legislation that is holistic and that is responsive and that centers your humanity. And, Angel, when you were speaking about the ringing phone, I'm 48 years old, and I know it's probably in 2022, few people have landlines anyway, but because of just the constant, the psychological trauma of a ringing phone and what that represents in my own life, growing up in a household where no matter how hard we worked, we just simply could not get ahead, and we thought that struggle was a character flaw, instead of understanding that, hardship is something that is transcendent, but the weight is disproportionately borne by some more than others. And that is about our systems and our structures, which have been created by policy. So I just hope that you'll continue to practice grace to yourselves. Every parent wants to absorb any hardship for their child. And as I said, that was done to open doors for them, which in turn closed some doors for you. And that's why we have to address the root injustices of the system. So no questions, because they've said it all in a way that was compelling and truth-telling and eloquent.
Thank you, Congresswoman Pressley. And similar, no questions, more just comment. Thank you so much. I'm trying to actually hold back here because I'm just thinking of how much my own parents pushed and sacrificed to have me go to college. We're so grateful. We all have mamas, right? And we all have parents. And so I'm just so grateful that you have dedicated your lives. And Khadija, I really feel that you speak to a lot of some of that flack we're getting about, lawyers shouldn't have their debt canceled and that kind of stuff where, not every lawyer's rolling in that, 8-figure, 7-figure salary or whatever it is. And a lot of them are dedicating their life to service and to help. And then they don't fit in that certain box for public service loan forgiveness. So I'm so grateful that some of the debt cancellation, some of your debt will be canceled, but as the Congresswoman said, everyone said on this call, there's so much more work to be done. We have vowed to keep fighting until every dime is canceled and we fully overhaul our financial system for education. But I, like the Congresswoman, feel very hopeful. I've been working in this space for more than a decade now, and never before have we seen the energy from organizations, from legislators, and then most importantly from people. Like we got started because of stories like yours. We got inundated with stories at the beginning of our organization, and that's what kept leading us to do this. I've always said it felt like some type of civic duty. The stories just didn't stop, so the work didn't stop. So I just appreciate both you and Angel, hearing that, your child did, so much of your dreams. I would say it's not over, right? You can still go back to school. You can go back to school at any age, but I understand when you're looking at this huge financial burden, that seems like it's undoable. And so the more we can do to erase that burden and take that away and make the cost of college free, the more that can be a real opportunity for people, parents like yourself that want to go to school, want to further their own education along with their students. So,
I'll
with
just,
that, go ahead.
Just again, I'm just so, I mean, if you remember where we started in this, right? People really tried to marginalize the issue. The idea of any student debt relief or cancellation, they touted as something that would be regressive in impact. They had a completely false narrative about who was burdened by this debt. And I would say even a classist narrative. I mean, ultimately, we were able to get union families and labor presidents, but they didn't think people who were in the trades had debt, had pursued, education. They didn't take into account, again, that Black Americans have been locked out of every federal relief program in this country, from the Homestead Act to the New Deal to the GI Bill, and are still targeted through redlining. So, we went from people saying this is minimal in who this is impacting, and so this action would be regressive in impact, to people saying the president didn't have the authority to do it, to then getting 3 pauses on the student loan payments. And I'm so glad that this next one goes through to December 31st, so that we can see how implementation is going in real time, and course correct. But all of those actions happened. This shift was only made possible because of this coalition and because of our vigilance. And we will keep up the fight because each of you is deserving of that advocacy and because you're worth it. But I just want you to take some stock truly of what was accomplished here, because the statistical odds were certainly not in our favor. And the national discourse and the media narrative, and even what some economists were saying, was certainly not in our favor. So this was a heavy lift.
Yeah, absolutely. We were laughed out of the room for calling for student loan forgiveness, which is the term we used 10 years ago, but I completely agree with you. It's a bogus term. It should be cancellation. But just laughed out of the room at the beginning. And then we were so lucky to see champions like Senator Sanders and then yourself and Representative Omar come on board to really help amplify the voices that were already there from the borrowers just screaming at the top of their lungs, who's going to do something about this? So I thank you for anyone listening on this call. It really helps to share your story. I love what you said about, I'd love what you, Congresswoman, about it'd be great to get to a point where people don't have to relive trauma. As a trauma survivor myself, sometimes the only way we get through it is by sharing and making sure it doesn't happen to others. So, but eventually we will get to that point that you won't have to reshare because the system will be fixed. And there's still so much to celebrate. And I also thank you for working on implementation. We have to make sure that we secure the win that we've received and then build for more. So all of that is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm just really just, sitting with gratitude, in this moment. And just, that's all I can just say is just thank you. And the work continues, both in implementation, but also to address the root causes. It's long overdue that federally that we invest in higher education as the public good that it is. And so we do have to continue that broader work to address the systemic injustices here. But we're not done in implementation or in the fight for cancellation. So very humbled to be a congresswoman who's a part of this coalition, but ever more grateful to be your sister in solidarity, in this struggle and in the broader movement.
And we're so honored to have you working alongside us, and for all of the work that you've done. It really makes a difference. It makes an impact, and so many families are going to benefit and receive relief because of it. So thank you, Congresswoman. Angel and Khadijah, as we start to wrap up, are there any final thoughts, anything that you'd like to share that you haven't shared yet in regards to your story or about cancellation or student debt in general?
Angel, I'll go first this time. I guess finally, I've been kind of moved with some of the stories about how this impacts people generationally. And I'm first generation born here from parents from Sierra Leone who came here to study and to live. And my mother actually took a PLUS loan from my older brother. And that debt died with her, unfortunately. And so, when I think about, this debt that is in front of me, I have to stay focused and exercise grace that won't be my portion. And I do have hope that it will not. And so, yeah.
Wow. For me, my son's story with debt is a very sad story. And I just hope that at some point he will get past all the negativity and stress and burden that once was supposed to be something exciting and wonderful and new opportunity and growth. And I just hope at some point that my son can have opportunity again and fresh eyes and hope. And he will, because he speaks of it, but always in that conversation, debt is always right there in that sentence. He just doesn't want the debt of it. And I hope at some point my son can have hope again to go to school and to broaden his horizons. But that's my hope. I have hope, and I'm very, very grateful. I realize I haven't said that. And the pandemic, believe it or not, was a blessing to me. But yeah, I'm walking away with some hope. And I've been praying for a very long time for the administration to finally do something about this. And so it's a major blessing. So I'm just going to walk away thankful and with hope for my son.
Well, we're going to continue fighting for your son, for you, for Khadijah, for your daughter, and for millions of families and borrowers across the country, because we all deserve better. We are not our debt. We are not our student loans. We are more than that. We are humans. We are worthy of joy, of opportunity, of choice, of doing things that bring us happiness and dignity in this country and wherever it is that we go. So again, we cannot be where we are today without people like you sharing your stories. It is really impactful. It makes a difference. And because of you all, we are here today celebrating and hopeful that millions of people will find relief, and we're going to keep fighting for everyone. Any last remarks, Joanna, Natalia?
There is a garbage truck behind me, so apologies, live TV. But Sabrina, just thank you so much for doing this and being our borrower outreach coordinator. I still remember you and I trying to figure out exactly how much your family was going to receive, and the fact that we got to that $50,000 number, not per person, but for families,
Right.
is just amazing. So I love the heart you bring to speaking with borrowers and always pushing us to elevate borrowers' voices more than we do. So thank you for that. And just to the borrowers and to parents together, it's an honor to be partners with you and to be partners with you too, Congresswoman Pressley, here in this movement.
And thank you. And I'll just echo that and say, Sabrina, we're grateful for you as well, just for your leadership, for your clarity, for also sharing your story and making sure that we can continue to center those that are closest to the pain. And you certainly do embolden me in the work of the fact that another world is possible, a world where our lives are defined by joy and possibility, and not by hardship and trauma. And we've all been using the word hope, and there's an affirmation that I say often just to remind me that hope is a discipline, it is a practice, and each of you certainly fortify me in that practice, and for that I thank you.
Thank you again, Congresswoman Pressley, for all of your kind words, for all of your hard work, and for listening. I think that's the most important thing. We really want people empowered to listen and to take action on our behalf. And so thank you so much for that. Again, I want to thank Khadijah, Angel, Joanna, Natalia, Congresswoman Pressley, and everyone who has helped to bring this together. Thank you to everyone who has been watching, following along. Please reach out to us, share your stories. That's what makes a difference. If you have questions about the cancellation plan, you can go to studentaid.gov. You can go to our website at debtcrisis.org. You can follow us along wherever there is social media. But again, thank you so much. This is really important. Having conversations like this matters. And it's because of this that we create change in this country, because people-powered movements really work.
Yes.
Again, thank you for everyone to coming out to this at the middle of the day, taking time out of your busy schedules to engage and to listen. And so I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, treat yourselves with grace,